today I'm joined by Nuala O'Connor, one of my literary heroes. Nuala is the author of SEABORNE, about Irish-born pirate Anne Bonny, which was published in April 2024 by New Island, which is this wonderful novel here, which we'll be discussing today. And her novel Nora, also published by New Island, is about Nora, Barnacle and James Joyce, and was a top 10 historical novel in the New York Times. She won Irish Short Story of the Year at the 2022 Irish Book Awards, and she is also the editor at Flash e-journal Splonk, and you can find out more about Nuala at www.nualaoconnor.com, and we'll put all the details of that under the video. So welcome, Nuala. Good morning.
Hi, Jen. Lovely to talk to you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you. And I wonder, would we start with a reading from SEABORNE, if you wouldn't mind?
Yes, I'll just swiftly give a tiny bit of background. At this point, Anne and her family have moved to the Carolinas, and Anne has entered a relationship with a man that her father disapproves of. His name is Gabriel Bonny. So Anne's best friend on the plantation is an indentured servant called Bedelia. She's of Irish origin, but she was born in the Caribbean. So they're just about to have a conversation. Anne is grumpy this morning because she's lamenting the fact that she's a girl. And she asks somebody to go and get Bedelia from the fields, really to take her away from her work, to talk to her. I see Bee's familiar form come towards me. She huffs up the steps, finally, making much of her slowness because of her growing belly, and the fact that I make trouble for her by dragging her away from the fields. What? She says, dropping onto the bench. I be in strife over this, Anne, I hope you know. The overseer will threaten to take his cart whip to me, and the master will chase my tail too when he finds out. There will be no whipping, not at all. I speak to the boards. Bedelia, Gabriel Bonny wants to marry me. She looks up at me. And does Anne Coleman want to marry him? I close my eyes. Yes, no, perhaps. I grim my lips. Yes. Well then, but should I? Bedelia sighs. Only you can answer that, Anne. I can't guide you. I jump off the rail and straighten her cap. Father would tie me to some man too busy by day to look at me and too stewed by night to notice whether I were his wife or a hole in the wall. Uh-huh, she says. Do you want that for me? Bedelia shakes her head. Gabriel Bonny loves me, Bedelia. It is carved on his very skin. And do you love Bonny, Anne? I pause. In a fashion, I suppose. I bite off a fingernail and spit the leavings to the floor. I feel fond of Gabriel, certainly, and it excites me to steal away to meet him. And we both love the sea, of course, so that ropes us tight. How will he keep you, Anne? The sea be no plantation. We will manage. Your father won't provide for you, Anne. Does Bonny know this? I shake my head. Gabe will lead me out to the ocean, that be all I know. If that means father cuts me off, never speaks to me again, well, I suck blood from where I bit my nail bed too hard. Of course, that injures me, Bee, but I think I feel ready. You have your answer then, Anne. Do you think so? If you feel ready, you be ready. There lies all you need to know. And father? I ask. She shakes her head. You know he will cut you away. He doesn't forgive God for taking Mistress Mag. He won't be able to forgive you for forsaking him either. So that's Bee and Anne.
Absolutely gorgeous, and such. I love Bedelia. She's such an amazing character, so warm and such a companion to Anne.
Yeah. And despite the fact that she's enslaved as such, she's not a slave, but she's an indentured servant. It's not quite as bad, but it's bad enough. She still has some agency. She's respected on the plantation. She has grown up there. She's thought much of, and she's very sensible, whereas Anne is a bit bananas.
And I've heard you talk in other interviews about and the separating the myth from the reality. And there isn't much reality that we know about Anne, is there?
No, there's a very scant paper trail. There's the general history of the pirates, but to be honest, it's so fanciful, it just does not ring true. And then there are various other pieces of information about Anne that they're very much of the period, the sort of romance of the 18th century, and people expected a certain type of woman to be a pirate. You know, she had to be sort of profligate and, you know, sexually untoward, and she had to be all the bad things. And so any woman who ended up in piracy was painted that way, whether it was true or not. So there's very little really known about Anne. The general history says she was born at a town near Cork, and that's all it says. But that doesn't come up in her trial. And the transcript of the trial, again, is the only other solid, maybe, piece of information we have. And even that wasn't published till a year after the trial. There's no author cited for it. So who wrote it and with what agenda? So I think when you're doing research about this kind of stuff, you really have to be careful of what's being presented to you and take it in the context of the times and then figure it out for yourself. So a lot of misinformation has been taken as hard fact, like the names for Anne's parents, the fact that she was born in Kinsale. All of this stuff was actually made up in the 1960s by a man called John Karlova, who wrote a book called Mistress of the Seas, which is this ridiculous swashbuckling, all the women are overly sexualized, and it's just an absolute nonsense of a book. He calls it a biography. It's definitely not that. And so a lot of scholars even have taken what he said as fact. He said he had access to family papers, but nobody else has seen them. So I personally don't believe him, and a lot of other people don't either. So if you don't do deep research, you end up with all this surface flotsam rather than the stuff that is more true or whatever, or just sort of sweeping the myths out of the way and finding out what is true. Now, some of the stuff written about her is so fun and interesting that it suits this kind of work of making a novel about someone. So the stuff like her cross-dressing, her alleged bisexuality, her fierce temper. I took all of that, but I took it sort of knowingly and used it because it's good stuff for novels. So you're sort of picking and choosing. But like, it left me free to make up her parents' names. I did leave her in Kinsale just for the fact that Kinsale have claimed her. So that's fine. Somebody has to claim her. So yeah, it's a matter of picking and choosing, and then just being very clear that I'm not writing a biography. This is a fictional account of a historic woman.
And the Maverick, I just read from, I think it's from the Amazon, one of the blurbs on Amazon about SEABORNE. Anne Bonny is a young woman of privilege who is anything but comfortable, hell-bent on a voyage of self-realization with or without the consent of those around her. Novelty-seeking, contrary, stubborn and bisexual, she is also Anne is living as Anthony Coleman because of the complex family situation. We might talk about that. And then she struggles with the transformation into Anne. And there was a lovely line, I resent mother's attempts to lure me into the womanly world when I want only to exist as I find myself. And I think we all want to exist as we find ourselves, but the pressures of her society were that she should be a certain way. And this was, they still are that way today.
Yeah, of course. I mean, all of this, unfortunately, is still so relevant because we still live in a patriarchy. Obviously, the patriarchy she lived in was worse than ours because she was the property of her father and then she was the property of her husband. So, yeah, I mean, the thing about her being dressed as a boy to live in her father's house is one of those things that turns up in the general history of the pirates. Again, it's a very tropish thing. You read the same thing about the English pirate Mary Read, that she was dressed as a boy by her mother so she could earn money, you know. So it's a very it's a common story that was invented in order to make something maybe palatable of these women. Oh, this is where they went wrong. It was their mother's fault. It was their childhood, you know, whatever. But, you know, because it's a fun fact, fun fictional fact, I used it in my novel because, you know, it might explain, if she was dressed as a boy, that she is confused about her role, her gender, about where she fits in, about what she's allowed to do as a boy and then is not allowed to do as a girl. So you have this struggle. And I also, after I'd written her, really realised that she was a neurodivergent character, because while I was researching and writing the novel, I was also researching autism because I had a suspicion I was autistic. Turns out I am. I got my autism diagnosis or affirmation or whatever you want to call it after I had written the novel, and I realised Anne is a version of me, that novelty seeking, you know, just the way she moves through the world. You know, she's a bit naive, but she's also very much someone who pushes herself forward. So I was using it, and I do tend to do that in my characters. There's an awful lot of me in my female characters. So, you know, when I look back at my novels as a whole, they're always about a woman who doesn't fit in, or a girl who doesn't fit in and who is very observant, which is what I always was and still am, very much a introverted, sensitive, quiet observer. And you see that with Anne on the ship. She's looking at everybody else on board the ship, and they're playing little sort of board games, and they're dancing and they're singing and they're talking, and she's noticing their ease with each other and how she feels. She says something like she's like a pole in a river around which all the water flows, that she just doesn't flow with, you know. And I've had that feeling all my life as well. Go with the flow is not a phrase that I understand or embrace, because it's the antithesis of who I am. I can be quite rigid about things. So she's a version of me. And reading the stuff that's been written about her, I mean, why does a young woman end up as a pirate dressed as a man? And it just interested me. And it is, neurodivergent people are often genderqueer. They're more likely to be LGBTQ, whatever else, in their sexuality and stuff like that. So that fitted with Anne's cross-dressing and all of that. So yeah, good fun building a character like that. And someone said to me lately, oh, they said, I hated her. I was so annoyed with her. And these kind of reactions always surprise me. You know, I had people giving out yards to me about James Joyce as well, which of course I'm mad about these people that I write about. I have great empathy and sympathy for their faults as much as their fabulousness. And I always find it funny when people have such a visceral reaction to a character. I think she's marvellous. I admire her courage. I've always admired courage in people. I know she's a bit thoughtless sometimes, but like, who among us is, you know, consistently wonderful and thoughtful and all of that stuff. So I just love to write characters that are ambivalent about things that are seen as normal or whatever, and who make their own path, mavericks, as you said. Like, they're the people I'm drawn to in life and in fiction. So yeah.
And me too. And I had a diagnosis of ADHD, which is also on the neurodiversity spectrum, I think.
Absolutely, I'm ADHD as well. Yeah.
So I relate a lot to what you said, and a lot to Anne's character as well.
Yeah.
I think she's, and I think anybody with half a heart would have to adore her, because she's just a gorgeous character. And she's thoughtless and selfish and very determined, though, very headstrong.
Yeah, she's courageous and obsessive, and she's independent, I suppose. She holds a lot of anxiety, but she's also very loving and empathic and adventurous. And, you know, I think we're all a mix of various qualities. I do have a suspicion that the person who had this visceral reaction may be on the spectrum herself, but she hasn't acknowledged it yet. And maybe sometimes I think people can react to characters in that way because they see too much of themselves in them and they don't like it, you know?
Yes, there's something there's a saying, there's something about you that I don't like about myself. something I like about you that something like that.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes you hear yourself making these criticisms and you go, oh, that's me.
Yeah, totally. And in the passage you read, that she's also very indecisive at times. She knows what she wants, and but she wants to be at sea. And I think at one point, Bedelia describes her as sea-starved and coddled in contradictions. And I thought it was a beautiful summation of her character.
Yeah, she does want to be at sea, but she relies on Bedelia as her rock and her advisor, and she's her true north, really. She's the sort of anchor that Anne doesn't know she needs, but desperately needs. Anne is very like her father, who is an impulsive individual as well. And, neurodivergence being genetic, the chances are, and this is what I think now, is that her father was actually neurodivergent as well, and she inherited his impulsivity. He did all sorts of odd and, I'm not going to say untoward, just decisions that would have pushed against society. And they're the people I'm interested in. So she's a quester, she's a questioner, like him, a bit of a misfit. She craves new experience, and mostly she craves the sea. And Bedelia doesn't like the sea, so when Anne takes her journeys, sometimes Bedelia goes and sometimes she doesn't, but she's always trying to get back to B, because she realizes that what she actually needs is kind of B's steady rudder, or whatever you'd say.
And she in reading your piece that you submitted to Fraser Lit for issue 1 again this morning, Life as Mask, Mask as Life, is absolutely gorgeous piece of creative nonfiction. And that idea, like she and you spoke in that about fitting in with company, or not wanting, the mask being what we wear when we're in company, or to fit in. I'm not putting it right, but she responds particularly well to Captain Jack Rackham, Calico Jack, and she says of him that she feels womanly and able in his presence.
Yeah, again, he's a kind of a steady character. He was called a gentleman pirate because he tended to do things without violence. And again, she's a tendency to do this, to swap out lives and fit into the next life and see how that works for her. And Jack Rackham is, again, a little older, steady, but he's offering her this excitement within this steadiness. So he brings her to sea to be a pirate and warns her, this may not go well. You know that now. I want you to know what you're getting into. And she says, yeah, just get me out there. I want the adventure. And then she's a bit pissed off when the adventure doesn't quite happen. But he is, again, sort of the rock that she needs, the steadier. And he also, like B, will tell her exactly what he thinks of her when she does something wrong. He's not behind the door in telling her you're selfish and you're self-focused and you need to cop on, and when you're working here, you're working in a group, and she's just still struggling with that, because it's just the way her brain operates. She doesn't know that, but that's the way it is. But yeah, I mean, it's I think even still people will bring a sort of a moralistic head to a character like this, who is hopping from thing to thing and person to person and discarding people and using them. And she's still very young. But I mean, who of us is mature before 30? I was just talking to people about this yesterday, about how difficult it is to become a person and to understand yourself and to get the correct supports and all of that. And if you don't have the supports and you're sort of swinging in the wind, well, you have to find your own way and try and be true to what it is you want. Somehow this woman ended up in piracy, and that's kind of what the novel is about. How did she get here? And it's my imagined version of how she got there, using some of the fun fictional stuff that's already been written.
I think I'm still growing up at this stage, at age 50.
Oh, I do too. I mean, I'm in my mid-50s and I still feel like a child most of the time. So it's a journey. Still learning. Yeah.
And her relationship with her mother was very tender and very difficult at times, but her mother encouraged her, and there was, like, again, to quote SEABORNE, "It is not enough to awaken," her mother says to her, "you must also rise."
Yeah, I think the mother is just becoming aware that she has made decisions that are irreversible by emigrating to America with this man and with her child. And she wants Anne to have a better time of it in the world of men. She just wants her to be more, to have her freedoms and to have a bit of a life before she settles down into anything. Even though marriage traditionally was quite young in those days, her mother is trying to say to her, listen, don't do that, have a bit of a life for yourself before you settle down. And like, I think advice is a very tricky thing, isn't it? We try to give it to younger people. I was terrible at taking advice as a young person. I was completely thought I was right about stuff and was a little bit chaotic and still thought I was right. And I sometimes say I wish I'd had more guidance, but I swear to God, if people had tried, I would have told them to F off. So it's just like you're trying to give advice to people and then you think, is it valid for me to be giving advice? And I think the best way to learn anything is just to learn it, to go through stuff. We can't protect and cotton wool our kids. We have to let them make their mistakes and then just be there for them when they do, to kind of help out as much as we can. You can't live someone else's life for them. And I suppose the mother's trying to give her advice, but Anne is going, yeah, I'll do my own thing anyway, which I think is supposed, well, it's the way I lived my life. I was a bit of a brat though. So yeah, I suppose as I get older, I'm thinking about all this stuff. And because I have now a teenage daughter and I worry about her going out into the world of men, and I do try and give advice, but I also know, unfortunately, she has to learn from her own things, All the cliches are true, it turns out.
Yeah, I guess, and I had to learn by lots, and the only way I learned was by mistakes, and it's I think what Anne lacked in many ways was someone to model behaviour to her until she met Bedelia and Captain Jack.
Absolutely. And I feel that as well about my characters, the way I portrayed Nora Barnacle and James Joyce. They had poor role models. So it's kind of no wonder that they became poor role models themselves for their children who had very chaotic childhoods and adulthoods, that unless you have, and even people with excellent role models sometimes don't make it or don't make good choices or good decisions. It's all just so random, and some decisions are just the wrong ones or bad ones or ones that will lead you into trouble where maybe you didn't need to go. But I think unless your character is getting into trouble and getting out of it or not getting out of it, you don't have a novel. Like, all fiction is about, upended chunks of time for whoever the people are in the story, whether it's a flash fiction or a short story or a novel. It's all about trouble and whether they can get out of it well, and if this is not Hollywood, we don't need things to end on a high note or things to be tied up in a bow at the end and for all the problems to be resolved. Like, I quite like open endings. I quite like hopeful endings. I quite like gloomy endings. I like any kind of ending. I am curious about talking to people, maybe privately, to avoid spoilers about the ending of this novel, to see what they made of it, what they understood from it. So yeah, it's all good fun, and I love all that. I mean, you don't really know anything about the ending, I think, until you're finished, and then you can look back and see how is everything folding and refolding. And I mean, I'm not a planner, so I really am going in blind, and it's only when I'm a certain amount the way through writing the thing that I realise what's going to happen in the end. And sometimes then I'll write the ending and work towards that eventually, but it can take a long time. I don't know what anything is until it's over, if you know what I mean.
I'm kind of the same way. I write kind of almost I write by exploration to even almost to learn about the character, to learn about their world, their story, and then I hit maybe a third or 2/3 of the way through, and what I thought was going to be the ending maybe completely changes. And I really don't know, and a lot of times I don't know what it's about until I get to until I explore it enough to understand what it is I'm trying to say.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the joy of it, isn't it? It's very difficult when you've just finished something to explain it or to say what it is. And it's even harder if someone like an editor or an agent wants you to pitch it to them and you're going, I don't really know. I just know this happens and this happens and this happens. Like, I don't think most writers think in terms of themes and symbols. It's only afterwards that you say, oh yeah, look at that. That's a father-daughter novel. I'd never written one of them before. Most of my novels are mother-daughter novels, so it's interesting. My father died just around the time I had started this, I think. I think I started this in and around sometime in 2020, and that's the year my father died. So it's no wonder fathers are on my mind, and father-daughter relationships, and all that sort of stuff. So all of that leaks into the work. You can't help, it just does. It's not like you're there trying to keep it out. You just let it in because it's what you're making up, inventing hugely, but you're also drawing on life experience. And I'm not coy about the fact that a lot of my characters are partially me. They are me and they're not me. I think it's very hard to explain to people that don't write. They think that everything is autobiographical, and in one way a percentage of it is, and in another way it most absolutely isn't. It's just kind of hard to explain. I suppose you're just drawing on what goes on in your head and the things that you're obsessed with. I mean, I think our obsessions just come out in the work, and I write a lot about motherhood and broken relationships and sensual stuff, because those are the things that occupy my head, so they come out.
For me, it's very much about kind of dysfunctional families and recovery and that sort of thing. So yes, definitely, and I would agree. I'm in all of my characters to some degree, but they're not autobiographical. They're fragments. My characters are fragments of me.
Yeah, they're like when Joyce was talking about Molly Bloom, everybody presumed she was Nora. But he said, no, she's not Nora. She's an amalgam. So there's bits of this person and bits of that person and bits of someone else. And yes, Nora looms large in the language and in the ideas and in the, the body stuff and all of that. But Molly is not Nora, so it's that kind of thing, isn't it? It's like, I think amalgams are what we're working in. We're taking bits and pieces from here and there. Like, I take bits and pieces from everywhere. Everything I hear, if I hear a really nice phrase or word on a podcast, I will write that down, and I might bend it to my own purposes. I might just use one word, but it's all that you're like a little magpie, just picking things here, there, and everywhere, and then putting them into a notebook and seeing if they're going to be used, it's like word hoarding or whatever, and depending on what you're, especially as a neurodivergent person, obsessed with at the time, different things will come out,
And mentioning words, I heard you say in an interview that it's all about the language for you.
Yeah.
And your prose is remarkable. It's been a huge influence on my own. And the language in SEABORNE, what struck me, especially I loved the way the language changes from Kinsale to the Carolinas, and the soft, quick, those beautiful kind of phrases.
They're very Caribbean. Yeah, Caribbean sort of things. But she had to sound Irish and she had to sound American, but she also had to sound Caribbean because it's Bee's voice she's imitating. And Bee's mother was brought to the plantation from Barbados. So she has to sound like Bee and the other servants and enslaved people on the plantation in Carolina. So her voice is this weird mix-em gatherum. I had to make her sound a bit off kilter. So I gave her that thing that you also hear in the Caribbean of using be for is. IB, you know, kind of pirate language in a way, the language we're used to hearing on things like Pirates of the Caribbean. And that's kind of, it's tricky-ish to sustain throughout because you forget every so often. So that's where your editors and stuff come in. So yeah, I love voice and the sound of a thing. You know, I just love something to sound a little bit to the left of what's expected. You know, you hear all these ridiculous sort of things in creative writing world, like, oh, novels should be written in third person past tense. And it's like, stop, shut up, you know. I love first person and I love the present tense, and nothing makes me want to do anything else. In fact, one of my novels was an experiment in the sense that, well, they're all experiments, aren't they? But one was an experiment in the sense that I did past tense third person, and I found it so hard. So I'm more naturally an in your ear storyteller. I want you to be the listener to my story, whoever is speaking, you know. So I don't like absolutisms when it comes to writing. That, like, I also heard recently, because I'm writing a memoir about autism, I heard somebody say that the past tense is the tense of memoir. And again, I thought, nah, I can talk about the past while being in the present. So that's what I'm going to do, you know. So I just don't agree with a lot of rules around creative writing that people go on with and don't sit with me at all. I think what you have to do as a writer is find your way and trust yourself and just forge ahead and not be like, I remember early on as a writer thinking that I had to do everything that other writers were doing. You know, I remember hearing as a very new writer that Maeve Binchy wrote 2,500 words a day. I think I was at some kind of talk Maeve was given. And I thought, oh, 2,500 words a day, right. And then I realized what an enormous amount of wordage that was. And I was never going to do that. So I pared it down to, if I write 500 words a day, that's enough for me. And then in interview, I saw that Anne Enright says she would like to write 200 words a day. And I thought, well, if 200 is good enough for Anne, you know, that's good enough for the rest of us. So like literally it doesn't matter, you know, what anyone else is doing. You just do what you're doing yourself and what you're comfortable with and what you can manage. Like, I'm very much a morning writer. I write 5 days a week in the morning because by the afternoon, my head is frazzled and it's not good for creative stuff. I can do some artwork in the afternoon, but I would be more inclined to do administration or whatever it is I'm doing at the time, you know, other kind of work like mentoring or whatever it is, you know. So I think you find your voice and your feet. As they say, you learn the sea by sailing it. And I think you learn to be a writer by writing, and there's no other way to do it.
Yeah, my own discipline is 300 words a day.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, and Graham Greene was 500 words a day, and he would stop at 500 words, even if it was in the middle of a sentence.
Yeah, Hemingway did that too. He would just leave something sort of nearly with an ellipsis, because then he knew he had somewhere to come back to. And I do like that idea, and I used to do that a lot, but yeah, just you find your way with it, and I just don't think it's important what anyone else is up to, really.
No, and I mean, for me, I think every writer has to reinvent writing for themselves, and voice comes out of that process.
And also, every new piece of writing you do, whether it's a story or a novel, is like going back to day one. It feels impossible. You know, until you get past a certain point, the thing feels stupid and unwieldy. It can feel exciting too. And I do have a sort of a early novel giddiness, but that's usually because I know something of what I'm doing. But sometimes when you really get to a point, I always have a sort of a mid-novel cri de coeur where I just don't know what the hell is going on and I hate it. I remember coming back from researching my Nora novel, coming back from Zurich, crying on the airplane because I thought, I actually can't do this. I can't, you know, it's too big, you know, and then coming home and just getting back into the work and getting over myself, you know. So I think there's there's a different mood, a different feeling to it. You're dealing with obviously different characters, different situations, and all of it. But I mean, the joy is in that, isn't it? In, as we were saying earlier, the actual figuring out of this stuff, the sort of, going down alleys where you haven't a clue what's down there or what you're going to do down there, but you desperately need and want to go there and figure it all out. That for me is the day-to-day writing is the best part of the whole thing.
Yes, absolutely, I agree with you. And which brings me to my next question, which is about editing. Because I'm in the process of editing 2 novels at the moment, and discussing with Brian Langan, my agent, the edits on one of them. And we've had emails back and forth, kind of agreement, disagreement, so on, what way this novel should be structured. And of course, when I wrote it, it was perfect. It was a complete piece and ready to go. Yeah. And thankfully, Brian is one of the top editors in the country. So I fully trust him. And I had a eureka moment this morning when I got an email from Brian. So how do you find the editing process? How does it work for you? Or do you need many edits at this point in your career?
Yeah, Brian is brilliant and you're lucky to have him. Yes, is the answer to do you need edits? Yes. I mean, some pieces of work emerge more smoothly than others. So SEABORNE was in one form and it was my first draft and I was fairly happy with it. And then when my agent did her edit, it changed a bit. And then when Aoife in New Ireland did her edit, it changed a bit with their suggestions to me. And then for personal reasons, Aoife had to go off when the final edit was due. So she appointed an outside editor, a guy called Sean Farrell. And Sean is just some kind of genius. And he did such a brilliant, in-depth edit with me. And he made me see things I hadn't seen. And he made the book, with me much better. And I'm so grateful to him. So I think editing is one thing. Good editing is a whole other ballgame. It's fantastic and it's a pleasure. And like that, your light bulb moment, you get them over and over with a good editor because they really can see the big picture where you're just floundering around inside, almost in the dark, because that objectivity is extremely difficult when you've been so close to something for so long. You can't actually even see glaring mistakes. So it's great to get a brilliant editorial eye on stuff. And I love that. And I would recommend Sean to anyone. He does freelance work. He's a writer himself as well, which I think also helps because he has a feel for good material and good English or whatever. So I found him wonderful. So yeah, I do enjoy it when the editor is a very sensible and good editor. And I've had mixed experiences across the years, I'll say. I'll be diplomatic and say that.
Just aware of the time, so just one briefly, can we look again at this cover, which is just so gorgeous?
Gorgeous, yeah.
And is there a story behind this, or was it presented to you as a kind of a...
Oh, New Ireland are brilliant. They showed me about 12 different images. We had a conversation and we made a Pinterest board, myself and Aoife Walsh in New Ireland. And then, so she knew what I kind of wanted, the kind of style I wanted. And then she appointed Karen Vaughan to design covers. And she designed about 12 covers. And we all landed on this image as the one that we liked the best. So then you have an image, and my agent gets involved too, because she's very proactive in this cover thing. She's very, very tuned into it and very good at it. And it was Aoife who decided on the gold foil, which is absolutely magnificent. And yeah, delighted with it. And I was determined to have a blue cover because the book was originally called Blue Rush. But Sean said that sounds like a vape. So
it does actually, yes.
Yeah, he nixed that. And I just laughed and said, yeah, you're right. So I had to brainstorm covers really kind of very much overnight because we were trying to go to first proofs. And I came up with SEABORNE without the E. And then overnight, in the middle of the night, I sat up and I was like, with an E, with an E. So the next morning I sent an urgent email to say with an E, with an E, with an E. So that's how it was born. And yeah, Karen's design is wonderful, and it's blue and it's greeny and it's sea-like and, you know, sort of melancholic like me. So delighted with it, yeah.
And very evocative. So, and yes, just to give the time, maybe, would you like to finish with another reading?
Yeah, I'll just read the first chapter, which is literally less than a page. And this is Anne learning to see. And what you understand is that her mother is wanting her to swim. And I actually called the prologue the Blue Rush, so that I got Blue Rush in somehow. The Blue Rush. Up, up, up I sail, thrust from mother's arms. I soar skyward, sand-specked toes leading, wind basting my bare torso. Behind on shore, I feel the beat of father's concern, the thrum of mother's glee. High to the blue above I travel, a small, robust bird, for one short spell. But what rises to the heavens must descend, and down I drop now, as intended, into the salty embrace of the sea. I plunge through waves, and they hold me more truly than wind, are safer than air. I am caressed and thrashed, clasped by the water that takes my infant body close and cherishes it. I dive lower, down I go and down, feet after heart. Through the blue I convulse, wild in pursuit of this skill I must learn. My ears wash with a liquid purr, my eyes are drenched and calm. There is no need to ascend. I'm happy to remain swaddled in brine, listening to wave rush, tasting salt. But my lungs and limbs possess other desires, and they bellow and push, and up I swoop now, a fish, a vessel, buoyant and propelled, fully in charge of my body. Up I go, breathing the sea breathing me, until I split waves and push myself onto the water, arm over arm, pressing forward, onward, free, unsinkable.
Absolutely beautiful.
So that's her as a baby.
As far as a baby, it's absolutely gorgeous, and there's a lovely line there that just jumped out of me. Open it again. Sorry. Happy to remain swaddled in brine, listening to wave rush, tasting salt. Absolutely beautiful prose.
So the idea is that it's almost like a baptism, that this started very young and there's no way out of it for her. The sea is the thing. That's it. That's her main special interest, her obsession.
Thank you so much, Nuala.
Thanks, Jen.
Thank you. It was wonderful having you here today, and we'll hopefully have you back at some point in the future.
I look forward to Frazzled Lit, and congratulations to you both on this publication. It's a great idea and you're doing great work. Brilliant stuff.
Thank you very much, Nuala. Thank you.